Hi you two, welcome to Science for Week 5. Let's have a look at what you need for this lesson. So you'll need sheets 10 and 11 and your word cards for the learning pathway. Remember, if you've lost this, don't worry, you can just write the words in. You'll need your scrapbook where you've started your learning pathway and your soil experiment sheet. And you'll need glue, scissors, pencil, eraser. So go grab those things and then come back. Okay, so a reminder that we use our whole body listening when we are learning. So today we are going to learn about resources from under the ground and how we use them and how we need to conserve them. So remember, we're looking at conserving resources, so saving them and protecting them. So by the end of this lesson, you will match everyday materials, like a glass cup, that's an everyday material, and describe which resource it is made from and explain why we need to conserve resources from under the ground. Okay, so let's refresh our mind about what resources are on Earth. So we've looked at all of these. The first one starts with a W is water, well done. The next one starts with A is air. The next one, which starts with S, is soil. And then we've got metals, which are under the ground, minerals, which are also under the ground, oils and petrol. Okay, so we'll quickly look in at our experiment. So you can see here the low nutrient soil in the pink pot is starting to catch up to the rich soil here. So the rich soil has a lot more leaves on it, but there's not a lot of difference in height now between those two. And the low nutrient, the sandy soil, still has nothing growing in it. So here we go, got a little close-up of the low nutrient in the pink pot. So you can see it's only got 2 leaves. So we're going to record our week 5 observations. So if you have done this at home and you've got your own experiment that you're doing, record your observations. But if you're following along with me, we're writing in here, so pause the video if you need to, that the rich soil seedling is 5 paper clips tall and it has the most leaves. The low nutrient seedling in the pink pot is 4.5 paper clips tall, so it's catching up, isn't it? And the other soil has nothing growing. So fill that one in and then we'll keep going. So what have we observed about the different types of soil? What did you notice about the rich soil? What did you notice about the low nutrient in the pink pot? And what about the sandy soil? What have you noticed? Is there some differences between them? There is. So there's plants, well, not in all of ours, but we've got plants growing in 2 soils. So the one in the rich potting mix is the tallest and has the most leaves. The next one doesn't have as many leaves, it's only a little bit shorter. So what did we predict? Did we predict that the rich soil would be the one that had the best growth? Did we do that? Yeah, we did. So far our prediction is matching what we're observing, which is great. And what do you think might happen next week? The low nutrient soil is catching up a bit, isn't it? So what do you think might happen? Have a little think. So you might think that all the plants will get bigger. Maybe we'll get a very late resurgence out of the sandy soil. That might be your prediction. So everyone's will be a little bit different. Okay, so today we're focusing on resources under the ground. So here's a little prompt to help us remember some of those resources that we find under the ground. So what are some other resources other than soil that come from out of the ground? So what could you think of? So what about metals? We looked at that earlier in the lesson. Coal, clay, that's another one that we do use a little bit every day. How can we use some of the things that we take out of the ground? So how could we use metal or how could we use clay? So if you remember back to our first lesson, we looked at things that were made out of metal around us. So if you have a little look around your house, see if you can see anything that's made out of metal. Can you see anything that's made out of clay? Have you got any plant pots around you? Good. So have a little look around your room, see if you can spot anything that's made out of metal or clay. Okay, so the resources that are dug out of the ground are used to make a lot of the objects in a house, including the house itself. So my house is made out of brick, so that's been made out of resources from under the ground. And so these resources that we get from under the ground are also used to provide electricity and to power cars and trains and planes. So we're going to look at a slideshow. We're going to see some objects in the slideshow and we're going to see if you can guess which resource they're made out of. Are you ready? Okay, so resources from under the ground. Many of the products we use every day are made from materials we dig out of the earth. Okay, what are these made from? Shout it out. Dun, da, da, da. Well done if you said metals. All right, the next one, let's have a look. What are rings and bracelets made from? What do you think that's made out of? What's this thing here in the middle of this ring? Okay, so we've got precious metals and gems. So precious metals like gold. Okay. This is a bit trickier. What are many cups and plates made from? Are they made out of metal? Well, these ones aren't. What do you think they're made out of? Clay. Well done if you got that one. Okay, the next one. Ooh, glass. What about glass? What resource is that made from? Do you know this one? Glass is made out of sand, so it's made out of a type of sand. Okay. What do you think plastic is made from? We have touched on this. Do you remember which one from under the ground it's made out of? So it's made out of oil. There's a lovely oil slick there. Okay, the next one. So the petrol for our cars comes from a type of oil called petroleum, which I'm sure you all already know. And most of the electricity we use is made by burning coal, which is dug up from the ground. Okay, so these things are very useful. We do use these all the time, but we need to conserve these resources from the earth. Because why do we need to conserve stuff? We need to leave it for the future generations. So if we cut down a tree, we should try and replant some trees. We should be careful not to pollute. Especially if we pollute the local area, what might happen to the animals around? They might get stuck in it. You've probably seen some really nasty photos of animals coated in oil, so they can't clean themselves. We have to help them out ourselves. And we should clean up any mess that we make, which you guys are all really great at doing. I know that you're all great eco warriors. Okay, so we should conserve the resources from the ground. Alright, so let's see if we can remember some objects which are made out of metals. What can you think of? A little clue. There we go, we've got some things there that are made out of metal. You might have said something different. You might be thinking of something different. So, tins, cutlery, cars, sheds, all made out of metals. Which objects are made out of precious metals and gems? I'll give you a little clue. What's made out of precious metals and gems? So things like bracelets, brooches, rings, or jewellery. Now we had a look at some clay things in that slideshow before. What are some objects that are made out of clay that you could think of? Okay, so cups, plates, bowls, bricks, they're all made out of clay. Which objects are made out of sand? What's made out of sand? It was glass, wasn't it? Vases, bowls could all be made out of glass. Where do you think the petrol for our cars comes from? Where does it come from? Does it come from space? No, it comes from out of the ground. Here's another one. Where does coal for electricity come from? Where did that come from? Little clue there for you. So there's another one that comes from the ground. And which resources are used in building? So here we go, little clue here for you. What are some resources that we use in buildings? So we would use metal, clay for bricks, sand, we'd use that for glass. Okay. So what uses can you list for resources that come from the ground? Here's some ideas here. So some different uses there for resources that come from the ground. So we make saucepans out of metal, we use petrol to put into our cars, and you might use precious gems to make earrings. Out of these three, which one do you think is the most important for people and why? So would you pick saucepans, would you pick petrol, or would you pick jewellery? Probably not going to pick jewellery. What do you think and why? So you might say petrol to put into cars, because without petrol we could not go very far and we wouldn't be able to rely on trucks and things to bring us food. Okay, which use is not so important? I think we probably know this one. Which one's the least important? It would be the jewelry, so we don't really need jewelry. Okay, so every day we use things that are made from resources from the ground, and we're going to think about some things that you and people in your family use that are made from resources that come from the ground. And so you could just jot down a few of those uses in your science journal, so in your scrapbook now. So think about things that you use every single day that comes from the ground, and maybe just one or two things, and jot those down. So pause the video, write those in, and then come back. Okay, so even though there's lots of resources in the ground, if we remove as much as we can now, some resources may not be available in the future, or they may become very expensive because there'll be less of them. So for example, there may be a shortage of petrol and it could be very expensive to fill up the car. So this is another really good reason to conserve resources from the ground. So what might happen if we use too many of the resources from the ground? What's going to happen? What would happen? What do you think? I just gave a couple of reasons. Okay, so there might be none left. So what can we do to conserve the resources we get from the ground? Would you do something at home? Is there something you could do to conserve resources? Have a little think. Okay, so instead of driving the car everywhere, you could walk, like we do on Active Travel Day. When we go to the shop, you can reuse the plastic bags that we get, and you could recycle any of the containers or glass bottles that you use at home. Okay, so we are going to get sheet 10 out, and we're going to have a look at what the everyday objects are here, and we're going to match it up with the resource from the ground that it's made from. So we've got glass. So what was glass made from? That was made out of sand. So you're going to cut glass and then sand, and then you put them together in your scrapbook. So glue glass next to sand. Okay, and then you go down the page. I won't give you the answers, but the next one's a diamond. So is that made out of metal or clay, sand, coal, or a gemstone? And you've got fork and spoon. So would that be made out of metal or clay, sand, coal, gemstone? You've got jug, so you need to match that up, what that would be made from. And fuel, which one would that be made from? So pause the video and cut those up and then glue them into your scrapbook so that they line up, matching the one that they are made from. Okay. Alright, we've got a little bit of writing, so you'd be really good at doing this sheet by now because we've done quite a few of them. So this one is about resources from the ground. So we've got to think of how we use resources from the ground. So there's lots of things that we've gone over in this lesson. So one thing might be to make pots and pans. So you could write that in. What else? To make petrol for cars. That's another one. And so I'd like you to think of two other things that we've talked about today. And then once you've done that, we're going to number them from the most important to the least important. So if you've got making jewelry in here, you're probably going to put that at number 4 because that will be the least important. So put a number 1 next to the one you think is the most important. So if you think it's to make pots and pans, put the 1 there. It's up to you. And then number them down to 4. The next one, I'm going to go down here. So why do resources from the ground need to be conserved? So we need to conserve resources from the ground because, why? For the future generations, or maybe because we want to keep using them in future and we want to keep the cost down. Remember we talked about how it could get more expensive if we use a lot of resources now. So you have a little think and write in there what you think the reason is. And then over here, you're going to list some ways you could conserve resources. So it might have been to ride your bike to school, or it might have been to recycle. So you could use less electricity, so turning the lights off when you leave the house. Just simple little things that you could do. And then out of all of the reasons you list, you're going to put a tick next to the one that is the best way. And then down here, you'll explain why you think it's the best. So you'd say, oh, I think it is best because blah. Well, not blah, but something better than that. Okay, so if you want to pause the video here and then get some ideas, you can copy some of mine and then put in your own ideas here, or come up with all of your own. That would be fabulous. Okay, so we'll keep going now. And there's more stuff to do. So you've got to cut out the words today: mineral, metal, coal and oil. And we're going to add those to our learning pathway. So you can draw pictures to match those if you like, or write a definition. Okay, so this is the last bit of our science lesson today. It's been a bit of a longer one than usual. So this is just going to recap how we conserve the Earth's resources. So putting together everything that we've learnt so far. So with water, this is one of the resources we talked about first. We use only as much as we need, and we can do things like turning off the tap while we're brushing our teeth. We could take shorter showers, and that way we are going to conserve water. What will be the next resource, do you think? Well, it's still water. So we can, that's exactly what we just said. Okay, use the half flush on the toilet and catch water from the shower in a bucket and use it in the garden. Well, that's a very novel idea. Okay, you can collect rainwater in a tank, use a bucket to wash the car and not a hose, and use a watering can and not a sprinkler. Okay, so how else can people conserve water? Which way is the best and why? So out of those, which one do you think would be the best for you to conserve water, the easiest thing? And think about why. Okay. Alright, so soil is another one we've talked about, so we're just recapping this one. So we use good soil for growing things and not for building houses on. We grow plants to hold soil together, so remember we talked about erosion, so it can help stop the soil blowing away or washing away. Or we could use garden walls to hold the soil in place. How else could we conserve soil? Ooh, what else did we talk about? In the previous lesson we talked about putting something on the garden to keep it in. We talked about mulch. Are there any other ways you can remember that we talked about conserving soil? You could flip through your book if you can't remember, because you would have written some great ideas in the other week. Okay. Alright, and this is save coal. So coal is a limited resource from under the ground. So we can save coal by using less electricity, or we could make it in a different way. So maybe you have some of these at home. Maybe you have some solar panels. You can switch off lights and appliances when you're not using them. You can switch to low energy light bulbs, or we can use wind power. So these are all ways that we could that we could use less electricity. So out of these ways, what do you think would be easiest for you to do? Would you be able to go and put some solar panels on your house, or would it be easier for you to switch your lights off when you leave your bedroom? Okay, you could save petrol by walking, riding a bike, or catching a train. There's some great ideas. And we can save metal, plastic and glass by using less or reusing items. So we recycle what we can. Okay. So are there any other ways you can think of to conserve resources from the ground? So there's lots of things that we've talked about these last 5 weeks. Have you been putting any of them into practice? Have you been taking shorter showers? Have you done any gardening where you've tried to maybe use a watering can and not turning on the sprinkler? And which way do you think is best? Okay, and that is the end of our lesson today. I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.